Svolto. Pronti? Buongiorno a tutti, mi presento, sono Francesco Mazzoleni, il presidente dell'Associazione Nazionale Assistente e Controllori a Navigazione Aerea e sono un controllore del traffico aereo. Il mio compito oggi è quello di rompere il ghiaccio, ingrato compito. Cercherò di essere brevissimo, visto i tempi a disposizione, il numero dei relatori e la durata degli interventi, anche l'interesse sui medesimi. Okay. Welcome to everybody, buongiorno e benvenuti a tutti. E soprattutto lasciatemi citare solamente alcuni degli ospiti e delle delegazioni presenti oggi. Un benvenuto sicuramente ai rappresentanti dell'ANACNA, la National Supervising Authority italiana, un benvenuto all'aeronautica militare, sicurezza del volo, un benvenuto anche ai rappresentanti dell'ENAV, l'ANSP civile italiano, e un saluto particolare a Zelico, in qualità di rappresentante dell'IFATCA, il nostro Executive Vice President europeo. Un benvenuto senza dubbio a tutti i relatori, welcome again, e soprattutto al professor Bracco dell'Università di Genova, che avrà l'ingrato compito e difficile compito di gestire la giornata. Il professor Bracco è ricercatore in psicologia generale presso l'Università degli Studi di Genova e si occupa da tempo di ricerca sui temi della human performance, prestazione umana, e soprattutto sui sistemi socio-tecnici complessi, ergonomia cognitiva, processi cognitivi in generale e sviluppo delle competenze non tecniche. Io credo che potremo iniziare con la mia presentazione. Non ce la faremo mai. Ecco. Ringrazio gli sponsor del pannello, in particolar modo la società degli. Abbiamo una lunga esperienza di collaborazione con loro, specialisti Human Factors italiani. Ringrazio gli altri sponsor Generali e Fineco, che sono disponibili nella hall accanto a questa sala per qualsiasi informazione vogliate chiedere. Ringrazio più di tutti chi oggi assicurerà il servizio di traduzione, è il lavoro più ingrato che ci possa essere e anche più faticoso, e sono quelli che non staccheranno mai oggi. Noi qualche intervallo ce lo potremmo concedere. Panoramica sulla giornata di oggi. Ho cercato di strutturare questa introduzione in maniera molto rapida, utilizzando gli amici di Kipling, gli uomini onesti, e cioè who, what, when, where, why, e abbiamo aggiunto un how, come. Quindi chi siamo? Who. L'ANACNA è rappresentativa a livello nazionale di più di 1000 professionisti che operano direttamente nell'ATM. Abbiamo superato la soglia psicologica del numero 1000. La maggior parte sono controllori del traffico aereo, ma ci sono anche Flight Information Service Officer e Meteorological Officer e il tutto con un mix fra civile e militare, anche se a tutti gli effetti la grande maggioranza degli iscritti è civile. La nostra rappresentatività in questo ambito, l'ATM civile, è all'incirca più della metà dei controlli del traffico aereo italiani, che operano essenzialmente in ENAV, e la nostra missione principale, scopo dell'associazione, è l'incremento della safety a tutti i livelli, anche mediante l'aggiornamento tecnico professionale dei nostri associati. L'ANACNA non è un sindacato, non partecipa per cui a nessuna forma di contrattazione a livello nazionale e non è politicamente schierata. Associazione quindi tecnico-professionale libera che ha come compito lo sviluppo di dinamiche di dialogo con qualsiasi stakeholder, con qualsiasi attore del trasporto aereo. ANACNA è membro di FATCA, la Federazione Mondiale dei Controllori del Traffico Aereo, con cui collaboriamo ormai da decenni, sia a livello di apporto di idee, sia a livello di apporto di persone che sono impegnate all'interno dei vari comitati di lavoro. E dal chi passerei al cosa. Cosa stiamo facendo oggi? Siamo in una fase di transizione e ci presentiamo come direttivo dell'associazione al termine di un ciclo di lavoro di 2 anni. Intorno a voi c'è il piccolo Parlamento dell'associazione, i nostri associati delegati. Il nostro statuto a questo punto prevede un congresso, un'assemblea dei soci, attraverso il quale poi rinnoveremo sia le cariche, per cui il gruppo di gestione tra virgolette manageriale dell'associazione, sia il mandato. Il congresso o assemblea durerà 2 giorni, essenzialmente saremo in grado, spero bene, di gestire questo transito sfruttando le doti che così bene caratterizzano il ceppo latino in termini di capacità comportamentali. Ma questo accadrà domani, non vi preoccupate, non verrete coinvolti in alcun riot all'interno delle nostre discussioni. Per oggi l'idea è diversa, cioè l'idea è di avere un contributo attraverso gli interventi che si susseguiranno, magistralmente gestiti dal professor Bracco, visto che abbiamo già cominciato con mezz'ora di ritardo, su un pannello tecnico imperniato sul ruolo dell'uomo nell'ATM. E qua dovremmo riuscire a passare a quello che è il perché siamo qua. Perché siamo qua e perché parliamo di fattore uomo nell'ATM. Essenzialmente i temi di un dibattito oggi potevano essere tantissimi. Abbiamo decisamente degli hot topics che si stanno affacciando sul panorama dell'air traffic management italiano. Primo fra tutti è l'argomento della privatizzazione del provider civile di ENAV, deciso dal nostro governo, il cui iter si sta velocizzando attraverso le decisioni sia del Senato che della Camera del Parlamento italiano. L'argomento privatizzazione poteva essere molto interessante, soprattutto come ipotetico apporto dell'associazione in termini di idee sulle modalità, essenzialmente individuando per cui quelle che sono le ipotetiche vie e la miglior via alla privatizzazione dell'ENAV. Avremmo potuto parlare della polemica, la possiamo definire tale, con cui la Commissione sta stigmatizzando quello che a parere della Commissione europea è un fallimento degli ANSP nella contribuzione al raggiungimento degli obiettivi del Single European Sky. L'avremmo potuto fare su parecchi argomenti di dettaglio, la creazione dei FAB, l'ipotetico e anche ormai reale inserimento degli ANSP europei all'interno del performance framework, per cui della misurazione a carattere sia a livello prestazionale sia a livello economico, che è stato deciso in Europa. Ma avremmo potuto parlare anche di piano nazionale degli aeroporti, di quanti aeroporti devono rimanere in Italia perché il sistema sia comunque funzionante, della sorte dei controllori del traffico aereo che sono su questi aeroporti, ma abbiamo deciso l'elemento uomo perché in fin dei conti, fondamentalmente, ogni giorno, sia privati che pubblici, sia all'interno di un Functional Airspace Block o di un ACC a livello nazionale, sia a livello aeroportuale, questo è normalmente il bivio in cui ci troviamo durante lo svolgimento dei nostri compiti. Mantenere la strada della safety, sapendo che la nostra è un'attività a rischio calcolato e che il rischio è sempre presente. La strada, il cammino, dove vogliamo arrivare? Where? Beh, non vi impressionate, non entrerò nel dettaglio di questa slide, che è particolarmente complessa e di complessità parla, ma è importante secondo me focalizzare l'area verde, che viene definita come System Sweet Spot, in cui dovremo raggiungere il bilanciamento di quelle che sono esigenze di prestazione in termini di capacità, di safety, di cost effectiveness, il tutto in un'ottica in cui la complessità regna sovrana, e la complessità è strutturale, ambientale, regolamenti, leggi, è tecnologica, ammodernamento, nuovi concetti di operazioni, molto legati all'esecuzione di un business plan, ed è sicuramente un tema su cui vorremmo che l'elemento umano contasse qualche cosa. Dove vogliamo arrivare? Al system sweet spot, al bilanciamento, tenendo presente che spesso avere qualcosa in meno è meglio di operare in un livello di complessità che rappresenta un ipotetico rischio per le operazioni. Vorremmo che il system sweet spot fosse identificato da obiettivi per l'aviazione, per il nostro mercato, non da obiettivi puramente economici o di incremento tecnologico fino a se stesso, ma sappiamo anche dove non dobbiamo arrivare, cioè non vorremmo arrivare al punto e al luogo in cui l'elemento di bilanciamento alla fine è esclusivamente quello umano, quello degli operatori frontline. Quanti Mr. Higgins abbiamo incontrato nella nostra esperienza e quanti atteggiamenti di valutazione delle nostre prestazioni completamente fuori luogo spesso da parte di chi ha responsabilità di gestire in maniera bilanciata il nostro meccanismo di mercato, le nostre prestazioni. Come ci vogliamo arrivare? Beh, sicuramente molto nozionistico, parlando di ambiente, procedure, regolamentazioni, strumenti, essenzialmente interessandoci allo sviluppo sempre maggiore e alla manutenzione dei concetti che sono la base di un safety management system, attraverso uno sviluppo armonico e armonioso del contesto tecnologico di supporto alle operazioni ATM. Qua trovate Next Gen. Ahimè, non ho potuto trovare nulla di simile a livello di sintesi e strutturazione per quanto riguarda Cesar, che è l'analogo e omologo programma di ammodernamento e nuovo concetto di operazioni per l'ambito europeo. E soprattutto crediamo di arrivare al bilanciamento attraverso la manutenzione con cura e anche con devozione delle nostre conoscenze e delle risorse umane, per cui attraverso il training, attraverso essenzialmente lo sviluppo delle risorse impegnate. E lo sviluppo delle risorse impegnate, mi consentirete questo passaggio a qualche cosa di lontano dall'aviazione, dall'aeronautica, e passa attraverso sicuramente la conoscenza come elemento centrale. Non lo scopriamo oggi. Nell'ambito europeo del bacino del Mediterraneo in particolare è un concetto che ci proviene dai filosofi greci, Socrate in primis, gnosis euton, mi perdonerete, sono un po' arrugginito sul greco antico, che è lo sviluppo delle conoscenze, concetto ripreso decisamente durante il periodo romano, in cui però l'individuo era al servizio della res publica, dello Stato, e non era destinato a crescere individualmente solo fino a se stesso. Con Noscete Ipsum i romani credevano di poter strutturare una gestione dello Stato e degli uomini che servivano lo Stato nella maniera ottimale. Senza passare dal Medioevo, perché sarebbe lunga, fino al Rinascimento italiano e poi agli illuministi francesi, Descartes sicuramente qualche cosa ce la potrebbe dire in merito. Sfrutto un'assonanza fonetica inglese per dire che know yourself, know yourself. Noi siamo convinti come associazione che la cultura, la conoscenza, lo sviluppo delle nostre conoscenze sia basilare per arrivare a fornire un servizio sicuro, orientato al mercato, orientato al business, ma sicuramente orientato alla salvaguardia dei valori fondamentali dell'ATM. Detto questo, spero di essere stato nei tempi e passerei la parola e il gadget di comando al professor Black.
Grazie, buongiorno a tutti, good morning to everybody. When ANACNA asked me to be the moderator of this conference meeting, I asked myself if I should be here as a professor, as a researcher, or as the head of the scientific board of the Italian Association of Non-Technical Skills, because I can swap my hat and change. I can be both, because both things are, I think, are important in this venue. Why? Because we are talking about knowing ourselves, as you said. What does it mean? Knowing our place in complex systems, knowing our role in such a complex system. And as far as I know, studying this domain, I think that there's an interesting, huge, and sometimes threatening but exciting mismatch between the rule, the procedure, and reality. And what operators, practitioners should cope with is the management of the difference between the procedure and the reality. And this makes me think about the so-called situated cognition. I mean, putting your mind into the present situation, the current situation at the moment. And I want to invite the speakers and everybody to think about the situated safety. So, being safe now, what does it mean to follow the rules, the procedures, but not as a robot, as a human being, being clever, being exposed to failure. But this flexibility is also our added value. As Sidney Dekker would say, he said, the discretionary space, I suppose you'll talk about it later, probably yes, and I find this concept quite interesting because I feel that this is the space where you find excitement of your profession and where, from my point of view, the non-technical skills, I mean the capacity to communicate, to understand what's going on, to be a leader, to work as a team, etc., can find a good place. And this, from my opinion, is the main ingredient of resilience engineering. I mean, the capacity of being safe in a proactive way, in a new way, other than the classical points of view, taking into account the complexity of the system you are dealing with. So safety is an emergent property. In resilience engineering, they say that accidents is an emergent property of the system. Safety is an emergent property of the system. And I feel that it is coming from the non-technical skills. So if we are able to blend these non-technical skills in a good way, together with technology and organization, the rules, obviously, well, safety will emerge. And as a final take-home message, I'm the moderator, I should moderate myself, so I try to be quicker in order to leave room to the speakers. I have come to a definition of resilience and safety, at least from my experience, and in order to be clear with the practitioners I'm working with. And I could say it is the capacity of the system of practitioners, of the group, to provide strong responses to weak signals. Because if you provide a strong response to a strong signal, well, that's a bit too late. If you provide a weak response to a strong signal, you know the story. If you provide a weak response to a weak signal, well, that could be the drift to danger, the drift to failure. I mean, you could move towards the big problem. So what does it mean to provide strong responses to weak signals? Being safe, being resilient, being proactive, being able to share your feelings, to share with your teammates, to share your experience, the things you notice that can tell you that something could go wrong in your environment. But to do this, you need a just culture. And I think that we will learn a lot about that today. So that's all. Thank you to everybody. And I want to introduce the next speaker, Engineer Antonio Licu, Eurocontrol, from Safety 1 to Safety 2.
Allora, lo facciamo in italiano o in inglese? Un po'. Grazie prima di tutto per l'invito di essere qua, è un onore, grazie a Felice che mi ha venire qua, siamo incontrati un paio di mesi prima e la colpa è sua del titolo della presentazione, infatti. So I'm very pleased to be here, so we'll try to speak on safety 1 to safety 2, but particularly apply to safety culture. In fact, we wrote a white paper last year. We introduced, some of you have been in Dublin, together with Professor Holnagel and a few other friends. And since then, I have never received in my life so many, I would say 50-50%, praising emails and insulting emails. So we'll see how it goes from safety 1 to 2, but with the application in safety culture, if we see it is an asset or something else. So very quickly, serve il buon dito, eh? So first of all, a bit of introduction. Some of you maybe know what we are talking when we say about safety 2. How we will try to make a transition, because we don't want to throw the baby with the water, so from safety 1 to safety 2, and then the application it in the safety culture. As I said, one of the main complaints, and including some of my colleagues in Eurocontrol who have reacted viciously, what is this safety 2 that we have in fact invented it 15 or 20 years ago. And the main complaint that I had in the emails, he said, well, the theory looks attractive. It's in all the books of Sidney, of David Woods, of Eric Holnagel, but what are the methods and tools that you come with? And my reaction to that, together with my good friend and colleague Steve Sherlock, said, well, we've been in safety 1 since the Egyptians have built the pyramids. All the Romans have laid out their roads and were counting fatalities. So we have few thousands of years of research and time to think of the methods. And we claim that give us few years and we will show you some of the methods. We don't want to wait. And we say, okay, maybe it's exaggerating to talk about the pyramids, but Heinrich wrote his book in early 30s, and all the practitioners of safety one have about 100 years to come up with methods. And I'll show you a glimpse, and I brought also a little tool with me to show that we have tools today to talk about safety too as well. And how to keep the conversation going, in fact. This is definitely my finger is not the best one. Just press the next slide, please. Okay, so that's the white paper. We carry on. So safety 1 and safety 2 in a nutshell. Let's move to the next one. So this is a bit of introduction of safety 1. You know, in safety 1, we try to minimize the mishaps, the things that go wrong. And we have these manifestations. So we'll talk about unacceptable risk. We do our risk matrices. We look at the severity, the probability of recurrence. We do our red, the greens, the yellows, and try to minimize that. We are very much into causality credo, the cause and effect. And Sine will talk about that later on, and I will not insist. And we have the foundation, the bimodality, 1 and 0, black and white, very few tones of gray. And we treat the humans as a liability of hazard. So we are culprits. We try to identify the culprits and hand them. So we fix the problems. And the safety management principles so far, and that's also how we thought in Eurocontrol 15 years ago when we wrote the first safety management system, is to respond to occurrences or unacceptable risk and minimize. Yeah. So the risk assessment is look for the adverse outcomes. Now, in safety 2, we say, well, why don't we turn that around? Because one of my problems, and I think some of you as well, as safety managers, you go to the management and to the board meetings, and we present our number of mishaps, and when we show in the pie chart, you know, it's very little tiny. We move in Europe maybe, 10 million operations every year, 30,000 movements in average per day, and maybe we have few thousands of occurrences. So when you put that comparing, you can barely see the mishaps. And the guy said, well, we are very safe. Why do we need to invest? And my claim is that you need to turn it around. And we are said we are in so safe today as an industry because we invest. What we do well every day, that means safety. And we should measure safety by the things that go right. Also, my friend Steve Shero has a nice parallel. He said, look, it's like in your life. You will try to measure, the happiness through amount of miseries that you had. And then you see how happy you are or how miserable you are. So that will be safety 1 versus safety 2. And we talk about performance variability. The humans are, an asset. In fact, we cover the gaps every day. In front of the screens, flying in the flight decks, maintaining our equipments and so forth. We bring safety every day. And of course, it's like a revelation. And say, oh, we do that. Yes, we do that every day and we do it well. Most of the time we do well. Sometimes, because of contextual conditions, things can go wrong as well. And we want to understand in the risk assessment conditions of performance variability. And that will maximize, if we can maximize what we do well, we will minimize what can go wrong. So basically this is the difference between safety 1 and safety 2. Funny enough, we spend all our resources, all our money and resources looking and human and experts looking on what go wrong. So we spend, all our developments, we do research, and we spend very little on what goes well. And we don't say, well, next one. We don't want to throw the baby with the water because we still have to look at the negative events. Will be unacceptable by the society, by the management, by the regulators. But we need to focus also on the safety too. We have very much to gain if we look on safety too. And coming back to what I've said in the beginning, this is what I got as in the emails. This is our extracts from the emails. He's throwing out the baby with the bathwater. It's just theory. It won't work here. We do this already. I say, how? And then I say, and then they write, oh, by the way, we do it, but by the way, what are your methods and tools? And again, because, those the believers in Heinrich and the building and the pyramids and the fatalities, they had hundreds of years, as I said. But I'll show you that we have some tools. And I narrow the presentation on what the tools we have in the safety cultures. So, in fact, what can go well is very, and sometimes you are shocked and I so simple, yes, by the observation. Try to compare now if I have to lift from the the introduction and the speech that we have heard is, well, what is the difference between what is in the books and in the procedure and what happens in the reality? We have this naivety, and many of our regulators, including the European ones, that are over-regulating, thinking that if we have a regulation, we will be safe. Observe the regulation, and when you look in and read the reports where they did not observe the procedure, if they would apply the procedure, they would have been safe. And it is such naivety that the reality will happen as in the books. And the reality is very different from what is written in the procedure in the books. And I would say happily we have the people to cover the gaps. And you as air traffic controllers, the pilots, are covering the gaps every day. You are filling in the gaps and making us safe every day. And this we could see through simple observations. This is a picture that we took in Frankfurt Airport. I think is one of these big insurers. There is another picture that I like. They have it with Lewis Hamilton when he buckles up. But this one is with this girl. And in fact, what is written in the poster, it says, one thing, if you want to understand the risk, you need to get out from behind the desk. So, sometimes I'm also accused in Eurocontrol that I'm running slowly, okay. We'll speak slowly.
It is because of translators.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
They don't cope with your speed.
All right. I must have some Italian blood, speaking too fast.
Sardinian.
Probably. So sometimes I'm accused in Eurocontrol that I'm running a mission office or an agency, rather a safety unit, because I'm sending my guys out in the field. So to understand the risk, we need to be in the ops rooms, we need to be in the engineering rooms, and not writing, rules and regulations from the offices in Brussels. So to understand the risk, we need to get out from behind our desks. So that's the message, and I think was captured, not by us, was captured by an insurance company. So they understand very well when they insure your companies, what are the risks. So, and this is what amazes me sometimes, because I'm seeing a lot of people, a lot of representatives of, stakeholders, as we call them. They've never been people in the ops rooms. They are writing, the procedures, the people they call them procedure people. And I said, when your last time when you have visited the ops room? And these people said, well, we never visited the ops room. We read the ICAO manuals, the Eurocontrol books, and we have written the procedures. So, of course, these procedures will be far away from the reality. And of course, it is left to the humans to cover the gaps. So there are some approaches. There is a technique that I like it very much in safety surveys. We call it day-to-day observations. And you are observing what the people, they do well rather than what they do wrong. And sitting with controllers and pilots, most of the time they do things well. And you need to understand why these people are doing the job very, very well, because they don't come at work to crash an airplane or collide two airplanes. And sometimes they don't do it well. Because if we understand that sometimes when the performance will be variable, we will understand what produces safety. So what I'm saying, you need to observe. So we'll move on, we'll press on with the slides to go back in the time. And then comes back to the culture. So this is a bit, the first part of the presentation was a bit of the introduction, why we need to change that approach as well. In the past, it worked well to look at what goes wrong, because the simplicity of the systems, the socio-technical system that we mentioned before, they were simple. But today we live in a very complex world. So it's true also when I talk to air traffic controllers, and when you put mathematical models, the trust of the people in the room is reverse proportional with the Greek symbols that you have in the formula. But today you need to have that, because we cannot talk about complexity and still presenting linearity methods and tools. So, but, and we talk about safety management system, and to me these are the mechanisms, the processes, the procedures, the orientations. But if you don't have the right glue, and the right glue for me is the culture, the safety culture of the organization. So, we'll press on of this. We mentioned about the work as well. So the perspective on the safety culture. So the views from the inside. So let's press on with the next one. So what do we mean by safety culture? We can, if you Google it, I mean, you will find hundreds, if not thousands, of definitions. You know, it started with the Chernobyl accident, when the first time the safety culture was mentioned in the accident report. But what is the culture? And this you will see in the next slides things that I call it the real culture. There are extracts from our measurements. We've done 30 safety culture surveys with many European service providers, and this is something that you will see every day. So I leave it to you to read at your pace the slides. So, do you raise the issue if you see that behavior in the ops room? In certain culture, yes. In some other cultures, no. You know, recently they are blaming Toyota, or I saw recently it's with the GM that they knew about these problems with the cars and they've covered it up. Many organizations today, you know, they are in love with the lean approach of Toyota. But you know, the Japanese culture is to be loyal to your company. And I think they have not revealed these problems that they had because they wanted to be loyal to their company. That is the culture of that place. Let's read through other example. As an engineer, you are under time pressure to make a system work. Some engineers use a workaround, but this has not been formally evaluated. Do you wait to do a safety assessment, or you just go and do the work? Do you use the workaround? A classic one, as a supervisor, and the supervisor, it's a tricky position. You are one of the guys, but you are now in the management, so you are in the middle. So usually, well, in the classical ATC that I work, we used to have a briefing with the teammates, with the supervisory team as well. Today we don't have luxury to do that anymore. We have our smartphones, the iPads, we do it remotely. And the management is very pleased with the new toys, but are we really passing the briefing? As a supervisory position, are we happy with that, with what that information we pass through? And do we try to resolve the issue? You know, your mate says, well, this is crap, this new briefing system. On the other hand, the management is happy. Do you take position on that or not? How is it in your culture? It's a rhetoric, don't rush out to answer. This is one that comes from us, in fact. Because when we did the safety culture, it's not trivial or is not self-explanatory how to involve the Department of Human Resources or Finance or Accounting. And when we did the internal safety culture measurement, we had workshops with the HR and finance people. And we had one of these issues because the guy said, we are not safety people in this organization. We don't contribute to the safety. I said, no, you are wrong. You contribute to the safety. And this is lifted up. We are buying the video maps, the radar maps from an external company in our upper area control center. And when the bill came to be paid, the guy was about to go on holiday. And he said, I'll settle the bill at my return 5 weeks later. So guess what? The bill was not paid, so the radar maps were not updated. But he's not aware. He's in the safety chain of the company. That's one of my favorite ones. We have targets today. And I think we are just inducing misbehaviors because we will meet those targets at any costs. But just meeting the targets, not producing more safety. So are you concerned with the real safety implication or the usage of the certain tool measuring the just culture and the safety effectiveness of the safety management? It's about the real safety. I'm pretty sure at the end of the RP2, we will all meet those targets that are in the regulation.
Yes.
So we saw different perspective, different pressures, and because we are not all born in the same corner of the world, we have different genes, different cultural approaches. What works well in the Northern Europe will not work in Italy, and vice versa. And that is one of the things that I love to see when I go north, south, east, west. So the culture makes the glue of the organization. And if there's anything to be gained a lot in safety, is work with the safety culture. So let's move on. Safety culture in the context. What is important and what is really culture? Can we really measure the culture? You know, because when we go to the measure, well, this is really fluffy stuff, you know, like human factors. You know, how do we measure the culture of the organization? Well, we work with some universities, with Aberdeen, with Professor Rona Flynn. So we have a method, we claim we have a methodology. So, and we try to look how we behave. For example, these are again examples of safety culture. How do we really behave when nobody is watching? We are alone in the ops room, it's night time, we are collapsing the sectors, nobody is supervising us. How we are really behaving? How the boss takes the bad news? Do we really shoot the messengers? Or do we really take it seriously? Or depends, well, you know, it's Felice, all the time he comes with those problems, so we don't want to hear about them. So, what is the real priority for safety? Or is just in the books? In fact, the reality today is we have even taken out of our safety policy, the famous, the ESAR 3 and now later on common requirements is safety shall be the first priority over commercial, operations and cost efficiency. Well, that's not true. And it's not irreal because we do trade-offs. We spoke about trade-offs. Safety is just one of the other priorities. If we will be just safe, we will not be cost efficient enough. We will not make enough production. We will not have money to pay our employees. So it's a trade-off. But in that trade-off, we need to know what are the boundaries, the limits. What is the real substance of safety behind that? And that's part also of our culture, how we treat that in our company. Keep pressing, please. So this is what we came up with, a simple definition. Let's put everything on the screen. So in fact, if you look at, one click more. When we go and try to measure in an organization, we look at what are the differences between what is valued, what is said, and what is done. And every time at different level of the organization, senior management, middle management, and the workforce. And when the perspectives are different, you have misalignments in the culture. So if you wish, is the differences between what you have said that is the real priority, what do you think is reality in their thinking, and how reality goes. Safety culture is how we do safety here, if you wish, in a nutshell. So that will save you 10,000 pages of Google definitions, I would say. And the measurement is as simple as that. Look at differences. And it's all about perception. So when we measure it in our company, I don't want to mention other measurements in the NSPs, the management came straight forward. They said, can you have evidences, please, into this? And I said, this is not based on an evidence. This is not about the audit. This is what the people perceive and believe. No matter what you will be stating as senior management, this is what the people perceive. And if they are not behind you, you will not produce safety. So let's try to make the alignments between what we are thinking, what we are saying, and what we are doing. So if we have a perfect alignment, then you will have a good culture of that organization. So this is I love this one. This comes from Peter Drucker, who says culture is strategy for breakfast. And he was referring that, the senior management, the boards, they see, they do, and I do as well in Eurocontrol, team building, away days with the management, and write the mission, the vision, the strategies. But if you don't have the right culture, the culture will eat all this strategy at breakfast. It will not happen in the organization. And to paraphrase that, because that is in the management books, the next slide, please. I would say safety culture is safety management for breakfast. And we saw from the English breakfast to continental breakfast to the French. And I would say, safety management will be just a book on the shelf. It will not live in the organization. This is my test. When I go to any NSP, I dash into the ops room and I ask the first air traffic controller, what do you know about your safety management system? Or the SMS, and the guys, well, I'm sending SMS as we talk right now. But I remember we have a book that is somewhere on the shelf. So if you have the right culture, you can make any living safety management in the organization. If not, it's just a simple buzzword.
Few more clicks. Another one. Oops, no, go backward. Okay. So if you wish, this is about, I would try to build this relationship to give credit to safety regulation as well and safety management. We're in this triumvirate, because we're in Rome, so we like the triumvirates. So I would say the safety regulation, it's about compliance, be compliant, observe the rules and regulation. And it could give you a dimension of safety because we cannot live in a chaotic outspace there. We have safety management system to drive the controls and competency. Do we have the right mitigations? Do we have the people skilled, trained, and so forth? And I would say the culture, it's about the commitment. So if you are living in that middle space out there, I think you are having a happy marriage between regulation, management, and culture. And that could be a commitment between compliancy, controls, and commitments. And of course, when you go and try to measure the safety culture of a service provider, this service provider doesn't live in in outspace there. The safety culture is built on the national culture, the professional culture, that organization culture. So what we try to zoom in is to see what this makes sense and how that culture is nurtured, or there are different killers, and I'll present the positive and the negatives. And concentrate on the positives. There is a lot of things that these people can tell about how they do the work. The work as done versus the work as imagined. And if you look at different techniques, everyone uses today a questionnaire. So we have a questionnaire as well to measure the safety culture. But that will give you the climate, if you wish, at maximum. Even if the culture, the questionnaire, and we are not Myers-Briggs indicators. Some of you may know this. So these psychological profiles, when you do it and you read it, gee, it's me, 99%. So we didn't have that millions of exposure. So what we complement is we do local workshops. And we take, guess what, the positive as well as the things that go less well. And the people are happy to tell you how they do the work, rather than say, well, tell me why you miss up, you missed to give the right heading. He will be happy to tell you how he does the job every day. And sometimes, yes, he missed the right heading or the right climb. I think we covered that. So a bit of how we evaluate. We already started that with the questionnaires, but also with the workshops. And this is a picture that we took it from a restroom in a service provider. And look and observe when you go to this. There are so many artifacts. What does it tell you about that organization?
Fatigue might be an issue.
Yeah. Overtime, many long double shifts in a row. And you don't need to be an expert in human factors. You just need to observe. Sit there quiet and say, well, what does this bin tells me about these people here? And then try to talk with them. Why is this amount of Red Bull drinking happening in the restroom? And the people will tell you, well, maybe without disclosing the place, it takes us 2 hours to drive to this place to go back and forwards, or sometimes 3 hours to go and 3 hours to come back home. So I don't have time to go home, so I do several double shifts in a row, sometimes 16 hours, 32 hours, 48 hours, and then taking my break for so many weeks and days. And you know what? Even the management likes it, because they have even a deal to buy in from your free time. It's like in miles and more, Next one. So observing and noticing. Artifacts, the language, the customs of the place, documentation, their facilities. On a funny note, we have a bit of time, so we're visiting a different place than this one with the Red Bull bins. They have an ops room without windows, which is quite often in all the Europe. And sometimes the air condition is not at best. But the next door, what they have some windows. So what they try to do is to keep the door of the ops room open. And they keep it open, and they don't have these things that you can plug in and keep the doors open. And they use some roll of the paper toilet to put it there.
And we said, when we go back in 4 weeks' time, we will take, and we took a picture very discreetly to say, is that paper toilet thing still in there? So, and how they sort out these things of the lights and the air conditioning and the rumor in the ops room. So this you will never find in a questionnaire. These are you will never see the Red Bulls, the restrooms in a questionnaire. So you will not really measure the safety culture through just a questionnaire. This is a bit the message, by observing and noticing. Because this amount of quantity of Red Bull, okay, leave aside the negative side effect, it brings a lot of safety in the ops room. Next one, please. Okay, this is about how we collect it. We do it electronically or paper-wise, and the questionnaires, it's the breadth, but it will not give you the depth of the safety culture. You are just scratching, as I said. Some people, well, the professors, the scientists will tell you, you measure the safety climate if you just use a questionnaire. I'm very much in favor, and the team is very much in focus of these groups and interviews, because there you have all the stories, all the narratives. And one way to do safety too is by storytelling. It's so simple. You say, well, you don't have something which is very complex, a model, we put everything and we produce equation. No, it's storytelling. The listening, you listen there, you sit there and listen. Just have a good facilitator, and you will collect a lot amount of real safety. Day to day, the true stories. And you can do probing to say, oh guys, but you are complaining a lot, because some people think safety culture, it's an excuse exercise to blame management. And you say, okay, you have all these problems. What are the solutions? And they come with the solutions. So they produce the solution. You are there just to facilitate. Then of course you need to give feedback and next steps. And this is something which is not easy. We have a particular case that we are fighting for about a year and a half with the CEO of that company to accept the report. He doesn't want to accept the report. And again, because he's looking for hard facts. And you know what? These hard facts exist somehow for that organization. But he's in denial. He says, well, look, I'm trying to build a healing process here with the controllers. But that will not happen if you try to hide the measurement of that size. And it's not a small place. And you need to give back the senior management, but also to the staff. I've been very much involved in these local workshops, and the people say, well, what we tell you, it will never come to the light. We will never see these reports coming out. And yes, you know what? We will go and tell them that you have said this, and this message has been passed. And all the way, not only the negative messages, the good messages as well. And it's about the commitment, participation, and how open and transparent we are. So, about of the culture killers, and any coincidence with some of the things is just purely coincidental. So we have perverse incentives and arbitrary targets. And you can take it from the, the capacity targets, the cost efficiency targets, the safety targets. You know what? We used to have, and I'm visiting the ANSPs for one of these tools that we have, then they have to use it, and it's in the performance framework, unfortunately. And they said, you know what? In the past, by June or July, we have reached our targets of how many incidents A and B we have. And the consequence, from September, all are C and D and E. Inconsistency and breach of trust, it requires only one not to observe your word, and then everything can collapse. You can have the best just culture, the best safety culture, you can trash it in one day. What you built in years, you can very easily trash it in one day. And there are silos, the group mentality, controllers versus engineers, engineers versus management, management versus controllers, and so forth. So are we really together in this business, or is just, the prima donnas and the David Beckhams and the rest of the crowd working for the David Beckhams? So these are a number of killers that we have faced them in our careers. I faced them, I'm facing them as well. And it's how we also are, it's in our culture, do we take them directly in openness? Or do we try to, we are not want to be confrontational, and we just try to work through the back door? And this this is a favorite one for me, and I spoke about that in the beginning. Do the field experts, and we can skip on. We spoke about the work as done versus work as imagined. Do the field experts help designing the work? How do we do the separation standards, the procedures, the ATC systems? Sometimes they come from the outside, say, well, we have the best engineering team, so we don't need to ask controllers how it works. So, and I said, use field experts. And also my favorite one is in the investigations. So you see very often people, sometimes very young, bright students taken from the quality systems or from the universities, and they are thrown in the water to swim and do an investigation. But they will do investigation as the work as imagined in the books. I am shocked in how many NSPs the investigators are not people from the operations, and not just air traffic control engineers. Then how well the information flows. It tells you a lot about the culture. Where do we put filters? And we spoke about weak signals. Well, I'll claim there are no weak signals in the organization. There are filters. And this could be power filters, could be mentality filters, could be surveillance filters. We don't measure this because we think it's not important. And hence they will never make a pattern to become strong signals, because we want to filter, or not we want, but either voluntary or involuntary, we filter these weak signals. Okay, we can press on. What are the boundaries? How the organization is learning? And we will see that innovation sometimes, and I love to make these parallels with César, because César should be research and development. There is no research on safety and human factors in César. We just apply a business case. To every projects, we'll try to make them safe by demonstrating that they will be safe before implementation. But we don't do innovation. There is nothing research in, well, very little, let's say, not nothing. It's very little research in safety and human factors. Okay, let's press on. And how you talk, just 2 minutes on how you really can talk about safety culture. I said, we'll bring this simple idea. There are discussion cards. And they look like, really cards that help you discussing about safety culture. And when I presented it in different forums, people said, well, I had a bunch of crews, we're obliged to discuss a safety topic before every flight leg, but you know what, we don't do it. Once, because if we do it, we will speak always about the same thing. And secondly, we are not imaginative enough to bring new topics. And these cards will help us to, you take there about 74 cards, split in 8 different areas on how we measure the safety culture, about commitment, trust, just culture, and so forth. And this is how to show how they look like. Press on. So these are the dimensions of the management committing, resourcing, the just culture, the risk awareness, the teamwork, and so forth, up to the responsibility and involvement. And we have done and there is a question, an explanation, and a topic. And there is a 1,001 way to play with that. I'll let you discover it later on. So let's press on. You can download them. We have them in different languages. Just carry on, press on. In English, French, and Spanish, even more, Hungarian, keep pressing. Finnish, Portuguese, they are almost ready in Italian. So watch the space, soon there will be also an Italian version. And hopefully we don't need the interpreters for that. And what I want to leave you at the end, these concepts of safety too, they are not new. And when I go back to this, the question, what do you bring as methods? There are methods already out there. And I want just to show you one, and we finish with a little video, and I'll leave you the thinking over there. So let's press on. One of the tools and techniques is called appreciative inquiry. And appreciative inquiry is nothing more but look at what goes well. Well, safety too invented in different industry, mainly management. And let's see the professor who has invented this stuff. Let's carry on. Move on. The last. This is John Haynes. He is with the Leeds University Business School. And just I propose you to finish with that. Here is what he has to say about what is appreciative inquiry. And you will hear, well, it's like you have written in the safety 1 to safety 2. Why shouldn't you spend at least a fraction to start, a fraction of our resources people and budget to look on what goes well rather than just focusing on a tiny amount of things that goes wrong. So let's hear the Professor Haynes and we'll finish there.
Hello, I'm John Hayes. I'm Professor of Management at Leeds University Business School in the UK. I work with Aarhus Business School and have been doing so for several years now. And this morning what I'm going to talk to you about is appreciative inquiry. It's a rather different approach to look at organisations, change what's happening in organisations. Instead of trying to focus attention on what's wrong, and then trying to fix it, this approach looks at what's right, and then tries to accentuating the positive rather than eliminating the negative. The world out there is a social construction. We view the world in different ways. Think of the Middle East crisis, for example. People in Israel or Palestine or elsewhere, they have clear views about what's going on, but they have different views. Similarly, in our organisations, different people have different views about what's happening in those organisations. So we have different constructions of reality. And these constructions of reality are open to change. And appreciative inquiry is actually trying to change the way we view the world. So instead of viewing the world from a deficiency perspective and focusing on what's wrong, we try and view the world more positively, and we try and identify opportunities that can be embraced. Just as plants grow towards the light, so organisations grow and develop towards whatever it is which is the life-giving force in the organisation. So rather than focus on problems, we focus on opportunities, we focus on what's going well. And what appreciative inquiry involves, it involves discovering the best of what is. And then going one step further and trying to understand why is the best the best. What are the circumstances that are creating these conditions? And then exploring possibilities for amplifying the best. So we try and work out what it is that's working, and then we say, what would the organisation be like if this exceptional set of circumstances, if we could actually make that the norm and not the exception? And that's the way that we intervene. If in your organisation you were trying to understand why it is that you've got high labour turnover and people are leaving, rather than seeing it as a problem and focus on why people leave through exit interviews or however else you might investigate that, switch attention to why it is that some people are staying. What is it about their experience at work that turns them on, that creates and develops their commitment to the organisation? And then can we amplify that? Can we spread that across the organisation? When we look at problems, people get defensive. It's not my fault, it's their fault. People are reluctant to share information. People find it difficult to learn in those circumstances. Alternatively, when we focus attention on what's working well, people get excited. They're prepared to talk about that. They get engaged. This enthusiasm, this excitement, it spreads to others. And we can get a lot of energy behind trying to produce change in organisations. Give it a try sometime.
Thank you very much.
Abbiamo creato un crest che iniziamo a dare con questo evento. Tu sei stato il primo relatore e quindi sei la prima persona a cui diamo il nostro crest ufficiale. Grazie. Un attimo, vuoi scansare?
Grazie a voi.
Thank you. Are there any questions about this talk?
It is rather a comment than a question, let's say. With I was thinking to one of the strong point of safety one. What is attractive in safety one? And one thing that is really attractive is that solutions are simple. Safety one is solution oriented. So you do a safety assessment, you see that something doesn't work, you say, okay, the controller has to tell something to the pilot, the pilot has to read it back. Maybe it doesn't work, but it's clear, the solution is there to solve the problem. So I'm not saying, I'm not in favor of safety one, but this is something which safety two should, the direction in which safety two should investigate. Otherwise, will not be as attractive as safety one with its immediate solution is.
Maybe just a reaction and also a solution there. I'm not advocating, and I think then when we written the white paper, we intentionally trash in the first 10 pages the safety one. And the safety one practitioner was a bit feeling a bit upset about that. But that was intentionally. When you bring a new technique, you are provocative. Now, one easy way to do safety 2 is to build on the safety 1 tools. And one tool that we develop and it's available and it's working, it's in investigations. So what we did, we neutralized the taxonomy. You know, all the taxonomies so far are about the mishearing, missing, misjudgment, misprojection, everything is bad. So what we did, we just without throwing our tools to the bin, we said why, and Steve Shoro came with that idea, said why we don't neutralize it. And everything it's about seeing, hearing, judging, and so forth. And when you investigate, and this is what we need to indoctrinate our investigators, to look for both. We look for what goes wrong, but not all incidents are happening to end up in accidents or serious incidents. So people in between, they did also something well. So some of the barriers that we put in place, they'd work, and it will be good to know which barrier worked or did not work, and how it worked. And then this is a way to focus on. It's still a safety one tool because you start from the investigation and investigation looks for what goes wrong. But you are emerging to look in areas of safety two and positive safety. But we should not throw to the bin the safety one. And say we need to build on top of it. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. So we can pass to the second speech by Dottoressa Paola Lanzi, by Deep Blue, bringing liability the design process, the legal case.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Paola Lanzi. I'm a human factor specialist, and I'm from Deep Blue. You probably know this company that is based in Rome. We are specialized in research and consultancy in human factors and safety. In particular, we cover also other aspects such as security training, but our core business is on human factors and safety. And today I'm here to present you the results of a research that we are conducting and that is still ongoing actually, and that is trying to put together the legal world with the operational world. So we are trying to put together the legal domain with aspects of human factors and safety that you know quite well actually. And in particular, I will present you this method that we call the legal case. Is a new methodological tool which is intended to take into account the liability aspects of automated technologies during the design process. So we are now talking of the new technologies, of the innovation, and our main point is that if we talk of innovation, we need also to talk at the same time of liability, because the two aspects will be strongly connected, are already strongly connected, but they will be even more connected in the future. Sorry if I stay here, but I prefer. We already mentioned CESAR. We may have a different opinion on it. What is true, anyway, is that CESAR is trying at the moment to define a new generation of systems for the ATM. And with the objective of increasing the capacity, the efficiency, the cost effectiveness, while at the same time maintaining the same level of safety. This means that the new solutions that are being proposed are based on increasing level of automation. And we think that when we talk of automation, this is a topic that really needs to be discussed with the operators that you represent today. This is just a representation from CESAR that shows that actually all the main areas of the ATM system, of the aviation in general, will be touched by the new solutions. So we have solutions for enhance the communication, the separation management, collision avoidance, surveillance, navigation, routing, guidance. So we can imagine that in the next 30 years, maybe there will be a real improvement in this domain, and a new, what they call a new generation of ATS systems could be put in place. Maybe not all in the same country, but we can imagine that there will be some improvements. And one of the most promising is this one, the remote control tower, which has already been tested in several countries and is being appreciated as a means to control the traffic in minor airports, as a means to, just from a remote tower, to control more minor airports. But of course it is based on levels of automation that are much higher than today. And looking at those solutions, our point, I'm not saying that these are the solutions, of course, for your work. I'm not pushing in this direction at all. But since the whole system is pushing in this direction, I think that from the human factors point of view, from the operational point of view, we need to look at those kind of solutions carefully to see all the implications that they may have for you. Our point of view is that, as soon as you change a tool, you change also the activity that you perform using that tool. This is the basic foundation of a quite old theory, which is the distributed cognition theory. But I think this is still quite useful also for us. And the idea of this distributed cognition theory, which is a branch of the cognitive science, is that cognition and knowledge cannot be confined to an individual. Rather, they are to be considered as distributed across the objects, the individuals, the artifacts, the tools that are used, and also considering the environment where the tools are used. So this is to say that if you change the tool, you change the task. And if you change the task, you cannot look at this interaction just from the point of view of the single individual who is using the tool. I mean, I'm changing this laptop, and I cannot, from the human factor point of view, I cannot limit my analysis to the interaction between the laptop. I need to consider how this change in my interaction with this tool impacts the overall system. So the unit of analysis should be systemic, and this is also in line with the title of today's meeting. When we said when we change the tool, we change the task. But when the change of the tool implies higher levels of automation, there are several aspects that we have to take into account from the human factors point of view. because introducing higher levels of automation may imply changes in the support provided to the human operators, changes in the allocation of the tasks between the operators and the machines, of course, and changes in the competencies requested to the operators. As soon as you introduce higher levels of automations, of course, the role of the operator changes, and in a sense, it is far from the task. No? The operator is much more attributed a role of monitoring or supervision rather than actually a role of direct control of the tool and of the task. About 30 years ago, this point was raised by Lisa and Bainbridge in a theory that was called ironies of automation. It is quite old, actually, but still valid today. And what she said, basically, is that with the automation, we tend to replace the human operators and to overcome their limits. But at the same time, the operators in this system are requested to intervene in case of automation failures. So this is what she called irony of automation. They are far from the task, but they need to intervene promptly in case of failures or in case of problems. This because at the basis of this theory there is the idea that from the one side the human weakness is this one. They are prone to making errors, disregarding procedures, but on the other side, from the positive point of view, they have great flexibility and they are also adapting problem solving. Operators are really in between the machine and the task, with a role which is evolving, and it is evolving also because of the automation which is going to be introduced. And I know that this theory is not new, it's quite old, but I'm presenting it to say that nowadays that we are introducing higher levels of automations, we need to be aware of this, because the operators will be even more far from the task. And so the risk of having a role of just monitoring and supervision should be understood and approached correctly. And also, from this point of view, there are other aspects to be considered, because we said if we change the tool, we change the task. But if we change the task, in many cases, we also change the roles and the responsibilities of the operators. I have a very simple example. As I said, I'm not an operational expert, so hope you will excuse me if I make errors in explaining the operational practice. But this example is about the inbound sequencing. If we consider 20 years ago, maybe, the arrival sequencing was based on a manual sequencing of the traffic, in the sense that there was the operator, the TMA manager, who was looking at the radar and organizing the traffic using the radar, using the paper strips, but mainly it was fully in control of this task. Then, beginning of this century, the arrival management was introduced. And not in all the centers, of course, but we started talking about arrival management systems that provide optimal inbound sequences. In this case, the role of the operator changed completely, because it was no more up to the controller to build the sequence. His role was much more to control that the sequence provided by the AMAN was suitable, and to intervene, swapping the traffic or changing the sequence if needed. So there was a change in this role, and of course also in the responsibilities. Now we are discussing of a further enhancements in this respect with the introduction of the enhanced EMAN. And with the enhanced EMAN, what happens? The system keeps developing a sequence, but the horizon of the tool is much larger and is extended to the pre-sequencing sectors. And the sequence is translated into advisories, time-to-lose advisories, speed advisories, that are spread out to all the sectors, both TMA sectors and extended TMA sectors. And the ETMA sectors have to comply with the instructions. So we are even changing again the roles with the introduction of this technology, because we are involving the operators, most of them that were not involved before, in the inbound sequence, and we are also involving them in a different way. When I was observing the activity at Rome ACC, I saw in many cases the coordinator giving instructions to the ETMA sectors and saying, please reduce that bunch of traffic, or please slow down that group, or please redirect all the flow from another area. But it was different. In this case, it's the system that provides an instruction to the operator in terms of lose 2 minutes, lose 3 minutes, reduce speed to X knots. And it is different. Their involvement is completely different, and of course, their responsibility is also different. I was used to working in several simulations in the past, and I know that for most of the operators, the introduction of new technologies generates some resistances because of responsibility issues. And I understand this point. Air traffic controllers involved in the simulations often said, okay, I can accept this tool. It is perfect, I really like it, I really like the output that it produces, but at the end you have to tell me if the responsibility is on me or not. Because if the responsibility is on me, just on me, maybe I prefer to have the control on the task, rather than having a tool that provides information or decisions that I cannot control. And this is a point, I think, that we really need to face now, because we are at a changing point in the innovation. Now we are introducing higher levels of automations, and we have to solve this problem that liability or responsibility could be a blocking point for the technology. And how to solve this problem? This problem, our proposal is to solve it through a method that brings the liability in the design process of the technology. That's it. Do not consider the liability when the system is ready, but let's consider it before, during the design process, when everything can be changed, when the operators can have a voice in the design of the tool. You know, if the voice of the operators come at the very, very late moment when the technology is ready, what they can produce is to stop the technology. And in fact, there are several cases in which the liability was the reason of a showstopper, was a full showstopper for the technology. We want to change this point of view and say we are in a moment where a paradigm shift is necessary from the legal, operational point of view. We have to consider the liability in the design process of the technologies. Do you know this vehicle? Very good. This is the Google driverless car. Google has been developing this autonomous car for the last 4 years. The prototype costs quite a lot, because to 220,000 US dollars. But they had a problem. When the technology was ready, they could not use it in public streets. This because of liability issues, because nobody wanted to test this car on the streets. And they really needed to change the law to make this kind of car even just for testing to go on public streets. And this slowed down the process quite a lot. So now we are in the situation that Nevada was the first state that ratified the law for allowing the driverless vehicles to be tested in public streets. And at the end of last year, there were 3 states in the same situation: Nevada, Florida, and California. In Europe, we don't have this kind of situation because we are still using a driverless car in very limited spaces in Belgium, France, and Italy, but just within our research projects. This because we cannot change the law. So there are huge problems of liability, and for the moment we are not able to face them in our system. And this could be a case where the liability can be a showstopper for this technology. Even if it works, in other states it is used and solutions can be found. So our proposal is to try to face this problem that liability could be a showstopper for the technology, defining a liability attribution scheme associated to the technology, and allowing all the stakeholders to be involved in the definition of this liability allocation scheme. In line with the just culture approach, our point is that the responsibility for damage may require to be progressively transferred from the operators to the organizations or to the industries if needed. But to do this, it's important that we have means to raise the point, means to intervene in the process. Our proposal is to consider liability, as we said that human factors should be considered in a systemic perspective, safety as well. Our proposal is that liability should also be considered in a systemic perspective, and so it should be considered as one of the inherent properties of the system. As a consequence, we may decide to design not only to have systems that are acceptable from the human factors point of view or safe, but we can also try to design systems that are acceptable from the liability point of view. So are based on a liability allocation scheme which is acceptable for all the stakeholders. And we have developed this method, the legal case, to address this issue, and in particular to investigate the liability impact of the technologies during their design process. The method, which is being developed with Eurocontrol and with the European University Institute, that provide the legal knowledge, of course, behind the methods, contains a standard process which is intended to identify the legal liabilities during the design stage in a structured way, so that problems can be, first of all, understood, and second, addressed before the deployment of the technology itself. And how they can be addressed? They can be addressed through convenient technological adaptations or through legal arrangements. Because as we said, if we perform this kind of analysis during the design process, we still have room to intervene both on the side of the design of the technology and in the side of the legal measures that we develop. But this is not just a theoretical process. It contains also a variety of supporting tools that are intended to support the application of the method itself. And for instance, we have developed a large number of argumentation maps that collapse all the legal knowledge, also highlighting the differences of the regulations in the different states. And how we developed this method? First of all, we started from a task that we called framing the problem, and it was intended to define the legal framework for the introduction of the automated technologies in socio-technical systems, in particular with regard to liability. So what we have, what we are going to have in the next few years. Then we performed a task that we called case-based analysis and modeling. In this task, we analyzed the corpus of accidents and their output from the legal point of view, in the sense the output of the investigation and the output of the legal proceeding. And we also developed a community, because this is a rather new topic in the research. And what we discover is that there is not a community that discusses about this kind of issues. So we created an online community which is called the Network of Legal Research in ATM. And this is one of the 3 networks of research of CESAR. And this is an open community, so you can join it if you want. And it's a means to share information, share materials, share knowledge, and discussing together about themes of liability attribution in automated context. If you see the composition of the network at the moment is really large, and we have all the stakeholders of this domain involved. And it is really nice to see how they share in this network their different point of view and together find a solution. So from these 3 tasks together, putting everything together, we then came to the development of the legal case, which was tested last year in a preliminary test on the concept of ACASEX. And this year it will be more widely tested again on ACASEX and on the concept of RPAS. The method is based on 5 leading principles. The first one, as I said before, is the idea of designing according to liability. So legal liabilities should be addressed in a coherent and comprehensive way at the design stage of the concept. I remember when I started working as a human factor, it was not so common to have this kind of competencies in the design team. The design of the new technologies was up to the engineers. There were some operational experts that were involved at the very end of the process, and that's it. Then we entered into the process as a human factor expert. Then also the safety experts were involved in the design. What we propose is to involve in this activity also the legal people. Another principle is the proactive approach to liability. As I said, the idea is to start talking of liability before the technology is ready, and from an anticipatory risk management perspective. So do not react to the system defining the allocation scheme, but being proactive in identifying the issues to be brought in the design process. We also grounded this process on a socio-technical approach, so as system failures can only be understood in a systemic socio-technical perspective, our point of view is that also liabilities should be understood in the same perspective. We cannot simply give the liability to the operator, the frontline operator. There is also an idea of having a multidisciplinary approach to this topic, and as I said, this is mainly based on the involvement of legal experts in the design team. And the idea of having a case to work together is also intended to facilitate the communication between legal experts and other experts, and so give a possibility for the different communities to meet. And finally, we adopted a standard case-based approach. And this was mainly based on the idea that we cannot talk of liability in an isolated way. We saw that all this method is strongly based on human factors and safety principles, but it's important that we work in the same way with liability as we do with the other topics. How much time? Okay. In the same way, so we structured the process in a way which is consistent with the human performance case, safety case. So they are all based on the same process, which CESAR called Generic Transversal Areas Assessment Process, and this is also intended to make at the end possible to merge the different cases into one single business case. The steps of the legal cases, it is based on 4 steps. First of all, we understand the ATM concept. So we collect background information about the aim of the technology, the users, the stakeholders, how it is intended to work, what kind of needs it is intended to cope. Also, of course, considering liability, the legal regime and the regulation at the basis of the technology. We also identify the level of automation of the technology at concern, and we identify as a final step of step 1 the possible failures of the technology. After this, we enter into step number 2, where we identify the liability issues of the technology. So we identify the liability risks and examine the liability risks using tools that are based on argumentation maps and are intended to show how, given a certain failure, the liability can be attributed to one actor or to another one, depending on the particular situation. Then we perform as a step 3 the legal analysis, and in this step is particularly important for us because it is the step where we are intended to produce legal measures or design measures, so to find solutions, actually. And of course, the measures, as I said, could be at design level, proper legal measures, or can be based on insurances or contracts that are legal measures as well. At the end, we have a final step where we collect the findings and produce the results, but mainly we communicate the results to the stakeholders and to the decision makers. And what I didn't say before is that this process is intended to be applied with all the stakeholders. So it is really a joint activity. And the output can really be a kind of general liability allocation scheme for all the stakeholders. This is a representation of the basic flow, but what I wanted to show is this one. Sorry, it is quite small, but it is just intended to show that there are connections between this process and the other process that are running in parallel. For instance, the output of the human factor case can be an input for step 1 here, or the output of the safety case can be an input for step 1 as well here, when we identify the possible failures of the technology. And we also imagined 2 gates in this process. One is at the end of step 1, in the sense that, as I said, step 1 is intended to collect background information. If your information is not enough, or you identify that you have problems and you don't have a legislation for your system, you may decide to stop the process here, collect the information that you are missing, or you may decide to proceed, maybe having in mind that you have a gap to fill if you miss information that is relevant. This is the case, for instance, of the Euro-OC. I don't know if you know the case of the Euro-OC in Germany. This is a large RPAS that was developed last year, in the last 3 years, for the Germany defense. And they spent about 3 years in developing and testing this Euro-OC, that was the European version of the OC, which is used in the States. Last year, after a lot of money spent in production and testing, and there was the information from the German state that the project was stopped. And it was stopped because these flights cannot fly in the European airspace. This was new. This was nothing new for the ATM community. That they were seeing this from the very beginning of the project, but they were seeing this in a way that was not evident enough. If you have a tool which is standard, maybe it's a means also to raise the point earlier in the design process and to have a flag that you can keep some time up and say, okay, you are keeping your development phase, but don't forget that you have that legal problem to solve. So this is the gate number 1. We may also have a gate number 2 at the end of step 3 if we discover that we are not able to identify solutions for the introduction of this technology at design level or at legal level. In those cases, the idea in both cases, step 1 and step 2, the idea is to use an iterative process, which is typical of the design process, where you solve your problem and then apply again the case and make sure that you have now all the solutions. And I think that I'm at the end of my presentation. I have just one slide of conclusions. Just to remark the main aspects that I mentioned in this presentation. As I said, as soon as the level of automation increases, there is a need for a systemic and proactive approach to liability. Our idea is that it is now the right moment to think at the possibility of defining predefined liability allocation schemes for the technology. We may also anticipate the management of the problem applying a principle of design according to liability, so include liability in the design process. And last but not least, I would like to stress the point that all this method is, all this approach is really grounded on a human factors and safety perspective. So we are talking of liability, but we are talking of liability in the perspective of human factors and safety. So that's my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Anche alla dottoressa Lanzi ovviamente un ringraziamento per il suo contributo da parte di tutta quanta l'associazione.
Are there any questions? Any questions about this talk? Puoi portare il microfono?
I'm Nicola Gallo. I come from Palermo, and I'm part of the IFATCA PLC, Professional Legal Committee. And I would like to know, is this legal case already used in at the initial stage of any CESAR projects at the moment?
As I said, it is still under development, but we tested last year in one of the CSAR projects that is, no, I don't remember the number at the moment, but it is the one dedicated to ACAS-X. So they really appreciated the idea of the method. They contributed to develop the method itself, and this year we have a new complete test application of the method with them, and we are very proud that the FAA will also be involved, because you know that for ACAS-X there is a joint working group between NextGen and CESAR, and they are interested in the method, so they want to test it also from the FAA point of view. Thank you. Any other questions?
Other questions?
Good morning, Luigi Dio, traffic controller in Rome ACC. I have a couple of questions. One is very short and quick. And in the presentation of your presentation, the 5 principles, you mentioned the importance of the involvement of legal experts in the design process. Do you agree with me? It's as well, or let me say, more important the involvement of frontline operators? And the second question. I really appreciate your roadmap to implement the novel methodology, but this is a roadmap, so I think you are out looking to the future. My question is related to the current situation. What's your opinion on the implementation of remote towers, in few small airports now, in spite of the total lack of rules, and after the decision taken by EASA to suspend any work on the remote operated towers, waiting for an ad hoc rulemaking group? Thank you.
So your first question, of course I'm a human factor, so my answer cannot be other than yes. I fully agree with you that the operators have to be involved in the design process since the very beginning. And my criticism sometimes is that they are not involved in the definition of the needs that are at the basis of the technology. So I really agree with you that the operators should be involved. My point was to say that also the legal people should be involved. So starting from the current situation, we have designers, operators, human factors, safety people. Let's try to involve also the legal people. That was the point. Concerning the second question, the remote operated tower, yes, I know that it is a very controversial point. I'm not able to bring here a personal experience on it because I've never worked on projects related to the remote operated towers, so I don't have data that I can bring here. What I can say is that I know it is a controversial point that needs to be addressed carefully and with the involvement of all the stakeholders. But I also know that the industry is pushing a lot on this direction. So I think it's the moment to raise the point from the different stakeholders. We as human factors can make analysis, of course, but at the moment, honestly, I don't have data that I can bring on this. So I cannot say personally, I made a simulation, it is perfect, or I made a situation, it is not worthwhile. I don't know this.
Thank you. Other questions?
Morning, everybody. My name is Luca Greco. I'm an air traffic controller working in Milan Air Control Center. As you've already talked about the AMAN system and Bainbridge ironies of automation, and I would like to say that there's also a system currently under development by the DLR, the German Aerospace Center, that is able not only to provide advisories to the air traffic controller, but also is able to make the inbound sequence itself, depending on the workload perceived by the air traffic controller. The main question is, how do you think we might transfer this concept into the Italian law or into the European law, or in order to, let's say, define what is the responsibility of the air traffic controller operating with such a system like this?
As I said, I'm not a legal expert, but what I can say is that honestly, this method has been developed or is being developed exactly to address the point that you are raising. So it's a means to study if we can anticipate the consideration of the liability aspects of this technology, of this DLR enhanced AMAN now, before the technology is ready and you as operator has just to accept it or use it. So I think that a legal analysis can be done now, but what would be interesting to do is to perform a legal analysis which is standard. It's not just for the remote tower of DLR, it's not just for the remote tower of Selex, but is a more standard approach to the liability allocation. So, but I don't know, did I answer to your question?
Well, actually, I suppose you want to say that we should develop a legal framework to be introduced in this kind of system designing.
Exactly, this is what I said, what I wanted to say, a standard approach to this kind of technology. This is what I call standard liability allocation scheme.
Excuse me, nobody can hear you. We can talk about it later in a discussion, if you don't mind. So I would say thank you to Paola Lanzi. And now, Yvonne Herrera. She's a senior scientist at SINTEF, Information and Communication Technology ICT Department. Dr. Herrera is currently involved in the Single European Sky ATM Research, CESAR, projects, and acts as a project manager for CESAR project, such as a long-term innovative research project dealing with resilience potential for air traffic management, and avionics in FP7 project Ashley, leading advanced studies. Yvonne is a member of Executive Committee of Resilience Engineering Association. So, her talk would be about development of an application of the Functional Resonance Analysis Method, FRAM, for air traffic management safety assessment.
Okay. Hello. We have been the morning with two speeches. I will ask you to go up and down, raise and down, because it has to. We talk about human factors, and you might be tired. So I want you to refresh. Yes. Okay. Very good, very good. And now, please, thank you very much, because now we have to change the mind. We need to go from looking into legal aspects and now I would like to connect my presentation with the presentation that Tony did on Safety 1 and Safety 2. And the focus, as the title presents, is about the Functional Resonance Analysis Method. This method was presented first in 2004 by Professor Eric Holnagel, and now he did a book. But this is the other book that maybe somebody else will be talking about. And then we have the book from 2012 from Eric Holnagel. So the ideas he has been expressing are very much in line with the ideas from resilience engineering that focus how the system works, how the system copes with variations every day. So the focus here is to learn how the system works, how every day works. Because if we learn how the system works, we are very prepared to tackle when the system doesn't work. What are the signals that are changing? What changed in a good way? Which opportunities can be identified? Or what things are changing in a negative way? And also would like to thank you, Claudio, for the invitation and the support. It has been a very good cooperation. So thank you. So I will start with the why we need new methods. There are a lot of methods in event investigation and risk analysis. Why do we need? What is the method about? And I will provide a couple of examples. So I will use a lot of short stories. We are storytellers. You have heard a lot of stories today. So I will use this as an illustration, but I also will ask you to contribute. If you have something to share or discuss, it's an interaction, and I don't want to do one presentation. So why we need this? So the world is changing. As most of you know, in 1851, you started working with air traffic management, and at that time we had systems that were dedicated for one purpose. In the cockpit, you have an airspeed indicator, you have one system dedicated for one thing. And what is happening at the other side is an example of one of the projects proposed by Cesar, that is kind of the Internet of the future, where you will have a lot of interconnections, a lot of dependencies, and they are not these separate systems provided one information. You will have, for example, data from satellites going to the swim, have a swim where the aircraft can access this, and also there are developments not only in CESAR but in the research programs where we are talking about avionics systems that can be, you can reconfigure systems that are not safety critical from ground, that you can reconfigure on when they are flying. So there are a lot of developments that are changing. So we cannot use the same methods that are used in 1851 to tackle the technology and developments that we have now. Another history is to see a little bit what are the developments in safety and how they have evolved and how they have had an impact on how we do systems. And we have, in 1931, we have the domino model, and they says if you have a domino and the brick falls, it will have an impact in the system. This has been implemented in design of aircraft, that you don't have single failure, you have redundancy, you put a lot of barriers to do the system better. Then you have the energy barrier model that is very interesting. They identify 10 steps. And the first one is to minimize, if you have an energy, how to minimize that the energy is spread. And if this is spread energy, how to minimize the consequence of this. So you have both when the energy is released, and then if the energy is released, what you can do to minimize the consequence of the energy. So all these have an influence on how you have designed the system. And then you have the switches model where you have barriers. You have physical barriers or you have non-physical barriers like procedures and so on. And all these things have contributed that we have a system that is, as today's system, that is very safe and very reliable, but at the same time is a complex system. And I think Sidney put in one of his books, he put that an aircraft is a very complicated, but when you have an aircraft, when you have in operation, that you have a complex system. You have a lot of interactions, you have people doing the maintenance, is having some impact, the people that is flying, the regulators that are put in the operation. So we cannot see, so we have an increased degree of complexity. We have a safe system, but at least very complex, so we need new tools. And as Tony mentioned, now we talk about systemic models that try to address this complexity, try to identify how the system works. And these tools are quite new and cannot be compared with the tools that were developed in the 60s, that when we have the fault trees, and the fault trees have advanced very much. You have very big fault trees in ATM, and these are still used, but we need to look also at the system as it is today. So another premises is yesterday night, Eric is in Australia, and he said his latest definition is very funny when you go into research. There is very important with the definitions. And this reflects the advances in resilience, that we look also how the system works. Look if the system is going to be brittle, that you need to do an action. But if you have a system that works well, what makes the system work well, and how we can increase this? So look at the opportunities as well, not only at the shadow side. So if we're looking into resilience approach, we will need to look how the system works, but sometimes they may go wrong, but also how it works every day. You have a lot of flights here every day. You have a lot of go-arounds that go fine. So how we can understand this thing, how this thing happened, why and what makes things work, and to try to increase that part. So. Oops. So what is from? But from is, you can say it's a Norwegian word, but in English from means forward. And in Norway, you saw a glimpse on that. In Norway is, perhaps the next slide.
It was the name of the ship.
It's the name of the ship, correct. And it's an iconic ship in Norway. Do you know why it's iconic? There are different things on this ship. This was the ship that could go farthest north and farthest south. It was used by Fridtjof Amundsen, and when he proposed this shift, everybody thought that this was a crazy idea. But Kolinache built a vessel, and that's that remarkable thing on this vessel. When it goes into the ice, it goes upwards and it floats. And the idea is that it will drive, and it was used by Fridtjof to go up north, and fra Roald Dahlsen to go further south. So we can look at a little analogy with Fram, because with Fram we can see how things go right and also what sometimes may go wrong. So it's kind of analogy, but that's my interpretation. I'm not sure if Eric agrees with that. So what is Fram in as a method? So Fram is a way to describe how things happen, and it's not looking into structures and humans or organization. It's looking at the functions, how the system functions, and that's the start point of the project. And then we need to see the variability of the functions, because we have different trade-offs. They have been mentioned. You need to be efficient and thorough. There are many things that have an impact on how we work. So I will go through the steps afterwards. Okay. Can you put it there? So it's based on the principles, and I saw you have also some principles. It seems that the principles are getting very popular regarding remote towers. There are some tests in Norway and Sweden testing resilience principles in remote towers this year. So it's based in 4 principles. The principle of equivalent and successes. This has a relation with safety 1 and safety 2. The principles of approximate adjustment, emergence, and functional resonance. So we go for the first one. And this is the success depends on the ability of the organization of the system to anticipate and cope with situations. So there are many variations in the system. You do many adaptations, and most of the time these adaptations go right. So, and sometimes it might go wrong when you fail to have this ability. Can you have next one? And the idea of approximate adjustment is about we have limited amount of resources. You have a limited amount of time. The procedures cannot describe everything in complete detail. So you always have a kind of adjustment, because if you are too thorough, you will never get the work done. And if you are too efficient, perhaps the quality of your work is not too good. So it's a balance between the thoroughness and the efficiency. It's like I'm doing the presentation here. I want to have a presentation that is, you get the main points, but I cannot use all the time to explain all the details. So it's up to you. So this variability is necessary. It's the things that we do every day to get the job and the work done. Next one, please. and the principle of emergence. And we heard this morning that the emergence is how the system works, how the things affect each other. That we cannot define the system just based on the different parts of the system. The system is no longer based on the different parts. You need to see how the different parts work to see that, for example, a flight was successful. Is the interaction between the air traffic management, the pilots, how the system was designed. There are many components. It's not possible to define the system just based on the different parts. That was when we worked with the domino, that we could break the system in different parts and identify. But today it's not possible. We need to see the dynamics. We need to see the context. The context in Italy, the context in Norway is different. So we need to see all this variability. And in aviation especially, we have also many different cultures interacting all the time. And we have our regulations that have some impact as well. So all these things, we need to look into the components. So I will argue we just not need to look only in the human factors or the technology or the organization, because all these things shape how we work. So we need to look at these things together. And the principle of functional resonance is based on functional is because we are looking at what the system does, not structures. We are not going to do machines and the buildings and so on, but we are going to look at the functions and how the system should function. And resonance is because we have sometimes some variations. And then I will have an example. There is an example from Alaska, an aircraft that in the book of Sydney, that you have an end plate in the elevator that you need to improve, to do maintenance. And the access to that part is very difficult. And I work as an engineer and doing maintenance. And what we do is that when you have a component that is very reliable, then after some period you say, okay, I can increase the maintenance interval because they will save money to the company. I will not need so many spares. And if I have shown I have very good figures, I can increase the interval of this. And what happened is that an aircraft, it can operate of 20 years. And the maintenance interval was increased many times. And it was the engineer involved in the maintenance, the increase of the maintenance intervals. It was the organization what is doing the approval of the increased interval. Also who is doing the person who is doing the end plate check, the conditions, they are very difficult to do this change. So there are many things, many adjustments that can change. There are many components. We do all the time improvements on maintenance interval. So the idea of functional resonance is that we have some signals, small signals that varies all the time, but a combination of these signals will be amplified in something that we don't want. And it's an example of this drift in the example from the maintenance, from the book of, that could reflect this functional resonance. So how the variations that are normal, in some cases, can combine in a way that is not desirable. So these four principles are used as basis for the method, and then we have some terminology that perhaps is good to be familiar. And this about what we are talking, tractable systems and intractable systems, what is the function, what we mean by a functioning from, and the model and an instantiation. So tractable systems could be related to the domino model, to a clock, to something that we can define with detail, that we know how it works. If we will go our procedure, you know everything how it works in complete detail. But intractable systems are systems that it's not possible to define all details. It's not possible to see changes, system change. You update the system it takes some time to do the procedures, and when you finish the procedure, the system already changed. So there are many things that are happening, there are many dynamics. So this is more related to teamwork and interdependencies than related to a clock. So when we talk with FRAM, in FRAM we are addressing intractable systems, and FRAM is not a Swiss knife. When it's intractable system, you cannot define everything, but it aims to increase the understanding of how the system works. it worked. So we have a function in this, and this function is related how the system works. It is defined by an action, and then you have some aspects. And the aspects is the input, what is used in the function. And the output is a change of the state. If you have monitored an aircraft, and perhaps if you identify a conflict, you will change the state to give an alarm or something like that. Resources of what you are consumed by this function. You have time, that is, time can be a constraint or can be a resource, because during the last phase of landing you have less time, that you have constraint, but if you have a lot of time you don't need that much resources. So you have the control, that's what supervises the functions, and you have the preconditions that are necessary to do this function. So this is the way that you use to describe a function. So we have an example. So we have monitoring. It's one of the functions that most of you, how many air traffic controllers are here? Okay. So perhaps you can describe this function better than me. So you have the input, you have the flight data, you have radar data, meteorological data, you have your strips. All these are input information. You have, and the output is the flight's monitoring, or you can identify some potential conflicts that they will launch another function. So the idea is to, first we define these functions with the cooperation between the safety analysis and the air traffic controllers. And then you see the time depending of how many aircraft you have and so on. Can we have the next? So when we finish the description of the function, is that the model that you use is not linked, as you see, because the links appears as the situation evolves or as you do the analysis. It's not looking into the hazards and the risk or the problems. It's looking of everyday situation. So the model is described. It's not just this figure. All this input, output, everything is described. And then we can have the next one. And then what we do, it can be used as an accident investigation or incident investigation. This is an example for an event investigation. And this show at time how the links are in this function. Because as I mentioned, is that the work, we are talking about emergence, and in some points some functions are connected, and some points these functions might not be connected. So that's why it's not a fixed link all the time. It depends on the analysis. So we can skip that one. So I will go through these 4 steps, and I will give you a couple of examples while we are going through the steps. So take the next one. Yeah. So I have 2 examples. One is an accident investigation from Gare de Moine, and the other one is an everyday operation of a landing where I live in Trondheim. So if we look at the everyday operation and landing. So first we have to look, okay, we are going to do a possible situation, and then we go, and you describe, you have a lot of observations and interviews, and you have with the air traffic controllers and pilots. Maybe you can identify this is from a pilot interview, but you try to capture both. And then you have observations at the airport. So then you identify essential functions. And so as I said, the model describes the functions of the system. What are the essential functions? Not all of them. Some essential functions. And we do not define a hazard scenario. When you do a risk analysis, you look into the hazard scenarios and see how errors can happen and so on. In this, you look at the everyday operation and try to identify that. So we start doing capture the information and identify what functions are necessary and sufficient to describe the operation, And this is an iterative process. It could be that you are in the step 2 and then you have to go back because you identify something that is necessary. But it's an iterative process. And we have two things here, these foreground and background functions. And this is related that foreground is like the operation that you can analyze, and background functions are some of functions that are giving some constraints and opportunities for the foreground functions. They can be seen as organizational functions. You can see that how you manage training, how you manage resources. Tony was talking about the person who was in charge of requesting this equipment and pay this equipment. That will be in the foreground functions. And these functions have also different times, because the foreground functions is the operation that is going very fast, and the background function is, for example, the organization, change in the procedures, and this has another timeline. It goes slowly, but it's also affecting the operation. So here we have an example of how one function is described and how you provide separation of the function. And the output is that separation is okay, that you don't need an action, or you will need to do a level change. So you have different outputs of the function. So as you see, we cannot connect all the functions at some point because you don't have all the outputs at the same time. Depends on the situation. So you look into the model just without any connections. And in his book, Eric put when you stop on some guidance how you elaborate, and there are some tests that you do to see that the description is complete. So we have, for this particular case, we identify 26 functions. And then we would like to go into the variability. What we talk about variability, what is this about? And what happens in every day of our work is that you can have some internal variability, like how I'm performing now. You have some external variability that will influence the light and other things. And also you have the influence of the other functions. So how the system is working, how the technical system is working will have some influence in how I'm performing. And so you have different variabilities that can be internal of the function, external, or from other functions. So you see how the equipment that has to be paid, the radar, the variability on this payment, it has some impact in how the use of this equipment was. So it was a delay on the use of the equipment. So you go into the model and you analyze and you discuss. This cannot be done just by safety analysis. It has to be performed with operational personnel, and to see how these functions vary and affect each other, both in a positive or negative way. So you focus on which kind of variabilities you can have here. And then first we look into the functions, just one function at a time, and then you look how their functions affect each other. So how we identify the functional resonance. So in the step 1 you have your model, then you have seen some variability, and in the step 3 you try to map how variability influences each other. In the case case at Varnas, what we have is that we have some equipment that was not in use, so was damaged for a very, very long time. So the air traffic controllers have to read the information in another way. And also some good variability is that the air traffic controllers at Varnas, they like if there are some changes in the weather or some specific changes, they do a proactive action. They try to inform very quickly the pilots of the situation. So there are different kinds of variability, and the pilot says as soon as they are informed, it's better for them to do the preparation for the flight. So if you are early informed, he can do changes, has more time. So there are many things that the air traffic controllers contribute to a good safety performance. So what you can do of this exercise? So the purpose is to see the variability, how you can manage the variability. To manage the variability, you will need to control the variability as well and monitor. So it's looking into damp unwanted variability and try to increase this wanted variability. And then we did the exercise with the air traffic controllers, and we identified some functions where variability was important for this case, and to try to identify recommendations for this case. So now we will go to another example, and this is an event, and this is in cooperation with the Rogier Voltier, and we work with the aircraft investigation boards and air traffic controllers and pilots. So the point is that this cannot be done in isolation. So you have to cooperate. So what happens in Gardemont is that you have a failure of the glide path. At the same time, when this flight was in the approach, it was bad weather, so the pilots decided that we will do a go-around. And they did a go-around. It was a successful go-around, but the air traffic controller noticed that the altitude was very low, so it was an event that it was investigated. But the pilots didn't know that it was too low. So we will look at this with our FRAM glasses. So we will look as an event investigation, and we would like to see which are the functions in this exercise. So this is an example of how we define the functions, and manual approach, and then we identify a kind of different things that happen. First, what happened is that you have a runway sweeping, that then, okay, they inform the pilots you have to change runway. So the pilots change runway, okay. So they have to do a new final briefing, and they have enough time at that time, and they have to change the runway. That's when I have my Mac. I tested, sorry. Okay, what happened is that when they changed frequency, they didn't change frequency timely enough, but they have some delay, so they didn't hear that it was a failure of the glide slope. And then what happens we can try to do the animation. This is we tested it. So we have, okay. When the glide slope changes, it has a lot of information in the cockpit, and it was alarms in the cockpit, and then it was the bad weather, and then we can go to the next one. We can go the whole thing. And then he decided to go to the go around. So if we go to next, yes, next. So we talk about variability. What happens in this case? That change of runway. How many of you ask to change runway to the pilot? Can you? It's something that it can happen. It's not something very unusual. And then the pilots change frequency all the time. No, Sydney? I think all the time. It's not something that is out of normal. What happened as well, we have some crew resource management, cooperation in the cockpit, things happening under stress. So a lot of things happening, and receiving radio communication. This was delayed, some information was not received, but all these things happen sometimes. But this is the aggregation of this variability that can give us a situation that we don't want. So we have the manual flight approach, and then when we have a lot of variability and aggregation of this variability, you will have a function that is kind of overloaded. Can we go to the next? So what we do is that we go into the variability of each function and try to identify how the functions affect each other. So here we have one instantiation, and here is when we say runway change, and the approach communicate to the pilot change runway, and then they initiate the new briefing from the runway. And then we go to the next distanciation. And as I mentioned, sometimes when the pilot doesn't change frequency, and sometimes the tower also sometimes take this information and try to contact what happened, but this just didn't happen this time. And then the pilot change approach frequency was performed a little bit too late. So the pilot was not informed of the glide slope transmission was failing. So the autopilot disconnected, so he started his manual approach. So there was a lot of different variations that were affecting each other and amplifying each other. So here you can see how the variations are affected, and you can analyze later. But then when you have if we show the next one, so then you have how variabilities in one function are affecting other function. So how the communication for air traffic change frequency, perform go around. So there are many different variabilities in this event. So we start with the normal go around, and then we see how variabilities from a normal go around goes into these events. And then we try to do some recommendations. And then possible ways to monitor this variability. And then we propose some training, and it's not just pilot or just air traffic controllers, because sometimes the training is performed separately, but also how you can perform training together to see this interaction, and how you can monitor the feedback, the quality of the communication. Another possible solution is this proactive contact that it was identified both in Gardermoen and Barnas, that the air traffic controllers give this information very timely. So there are some things that they are interesting to look at. So to conclude is that resilience engineering doesn't look just at failures, but how the system can cope to variations and changes. And this can be expected and unexpected. And maybe it will not be possible to cope all unexpected, but be more flexible to identify when variations are happening, that we need to do something, and also see what are things that are being done in a correct way to increase this part. And FRAM is looking into looking how we know more the system, how it operates well. Because if you know how the system operates well and what are your advantages, this will help you as resource to cope with other situations. So that's. So I will be interested in hearing your impressions, and I have some arguments to use from to invite you to this work. And is that it's not linear. It's not human oriented or organization oriented. We are looking into the functions, how the system functions, and is suitable for these intractable systems. So, but with every method you have some plus and minus, and we can see next slide, please. So, as I mentioned, it's a multidisciplinary study. So we need to work together. We are dependent of operational experience and meanings of analyzing which variability is positive, what can be enhanced, and what needs to be damped. And it might be difficult, this analysis of variability. So step 3 and 4 can be very difficult and demanding. But this, as I mentioned, this work has started in 2004-06, and so it's ongoing. So you have any questions?
Good day to everybody. Andrea Artoni. I'm here as a guest, but I am a former air traffic controller. And what I have been listening to today was mainly something that relates on God's view of this business, not exactly what could be interesting to the normal operator. And I would like to address the desk and the audience to be more aware the fact that, from my point of view, being safe is in practice feeling of being safe as a situational awareness issue. So to be aware that we are safe. So, which means, and procedures are being studied and developed in order to have operators be more advised and aware of the system's safety level and dynamics, especially when changes of the system are being designed, developed, and implemented. So it is not a question to your work that was very, very interesting, because it is a new prospect on this issue. But the fact that in the future presentations, I would like to be more aware of what is being said to the audience as an operator's audience. We are not providers, we are not management. What has been said is very interesting and very important to the management level, but the operators level we are more interested in. Thank you.
I will say something because at operators level, this is the way that you perform safely. That's the reflection of that, and learning how you work every day. It will be better for the organization to improve the way that they work.
Again, me, Nicola Gallo from Palermo. You said that FRAM is based on the systemic view of systems. And this means, if I'm not wrong, that you should analyze both failures and successes. But, for example, in the example you mentioned about the Nord Air Shuttle, I saw no success in all these elements you've shown.
What we have in this event analysis, a good question, is that we look first in everyday operation and then we map the event. And what we identify as well is that you have this proactive communication between the air traffic controllers and the pilots, and this is a good thing. It's a thing that contributes to the safety. So we look into both what goes right and what goes wrong, and it's also a challenge to identify more of these kind of things, because we are so used to look into what mistakes have been done or what technology has failed. So we are trying to do progress in this part, and we are working on that, and I think we have more to do in that area.
Other questions?
I have something else to say before. Can you put the presentation? I was going to. You have to put the last one. Okay. What I would like to invite you is that there are many developments in resilience engineering and in this area. And I would like to show you some couple of things that are going on that you are invited to participate. And one of them is that we have a framework group around the world, and we meet one time a year to discuss, and it's very much operational and researchers, and you are welcome to that. And it's the next slide. So we have the 8th family is this year is scheduled in Chambers University. So you are invited to participate if you have some interest. And in the association, if you want to participate in the association, you are very welcome. And there will be René Amalberti will present his book that is quite interesting. I will recommend his book. And if you are not going to Paris, you can also look at from your work or from your office. So it will be a webinar. So they are welcome. And we have another project with looking into indicators and resilience together with Deep Blue. So we might do some workshops. So it will be very welcome that you help us in this part. And there is other work that it was some interest on remote towers, and there is a work package, a project in CESAR that is started now that is going to test the concept of the principles of resilience in remote towers. And in Norway they have done last year for single airport, and then they are going to do resilience for multiple